The journey begins. A dream of freedom. The Statue of Liberty stood tall against the pale blue sky, her torch gleaming like a guiding star in the distance. From the deck of the crowded immigrant ship, Rena watched with a mixture of awe and anticipation. For years, she had dreamed of this moment. The moment when she would finally step foot in a land that promised freedom, opportunity, and hope. America, the land where dreams came alive. She clutched the small bundle of belongings tightly against her chest, her heart pounding with both excitement and fear. Rena had left behind her life in war-torn Eastern Europe. Her family had been poor farmers, struggling every day to survive under the weight of conflict and poverty. She had heard the stories from neighbors who had made the long, treacherous journey across the ocean. Tales of a place where anyone could build a future, where the weight of her past could be left behind. It was these stories that had fueled her decision to leave everything she knew and venture into the unknown. The ship creaked under the pressure of the waves, and Rena's eyes never left the silhouette of the Statue of Liberty. Her mind raced, painting vivid images of the life that awaited her. In her mind, she saw herself working in a bustling city, earning enough to send money back to her family, maybe even owning a small house one day. She imagined herself walking freely on clean streets, no longer afraid of the soldiers who roamed her homeland. The possibilities seemed endless, and she could almost taste the freedom. Her fellow travelers, also crammed together on the deck, shared in her excitement, their eyes also fixed on the statue. Some whispered prayers, others clung to their children, and a few wept silently, knowing the journey had cost them everything. Yet, in that moment, they all shared the same dream, of starting anew, of becoming something more than the life they had left behind. Rena's hope was contagious, her excitement infectious. She whispered to the woman next to her, "When we arrive, we will be free." The woman, older and more weathered by the hardships of the journey, smiled faintly. "Yes, freedom," she muttered, though there was a weariness in her voice that Rena could not place. The woman had seen much more of the world than Rena, and yet she had the same dream. But something about her tone made Rena wonder if there was more to freedom than she had imagined. As the ship drew closer to the harbor, the distant figure of the Statue of Liberty grew larger. Rena's heartbeat quickened. This was it, the land of hope, the land of possibilities. She stood taller, wiping away the salt from her eyes, determined to find her place in this new world. But as the ship approached the pier, Rena couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps the path to freedom wasn't as clear as the statue's shining torch. With the excitement swelling in her chest, a quiet, creeping doubt began to take root. Was this really the fresh start she had longed for? Or was the true journey still ahead of her? The moment she had dreamed of for so long was about to begin. But little did she know, it would be far more complicated than she could have ever imagined. And so, the ship glided into New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty now towering over them, her light promising a future. But Rena wasn't certain if that promise would be as bright as it seemed. The struggle, the immigrant's reality. Rena's feet hit the cold concrete of Ellis Island, the hustle of New York City surrounding her with its deafening roar. She had arrived. The promise of a fresh start of freedom seemed to fade in the harsh reality of the crowded, bustling world she had entered. The Statue of Liberty, once a beacon of hope from the deck of the ship, now seemed distant, almost unreachable. The city towered around her like a maze, its towering buildings mocking the smallness of her dreams. The line at the immigration office snaked endlessly, filled with people who spoke in languages she couldn't understand, faces etched with weariness from their long journey. Her heart sank with each passing moment. She had imagined something different, a land of open arms, where she would be welcomed and offered the chance to begin again. But this felt more like an obstacle than a welcome. After hours of waiting, Rena was finally ushered to a small desk. The officer behind it barely glanced at her, his eyes flicking over the paper in front of him before he stamped it with an uninterested thud. "Next," he said flatly. Rena took her papers and moved through the next checkpoint, the weight of her belongings growing heavier with every step. The excitement that had fueled her for so long was beginning to feel like a distant memory, overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of isolation. The city was a blur of chaos, horns honking, people rushing in every direction, none of them taking notice of the strangers around them. Rena felt like a speck in the crowd, invisible, her dreams fading as the enormity of the place overwhelmed her. She had no family here, no connections, just a small sum of money in her pocket, and a heart full of hope that seemed to grow dimmer with every passing moment. She rented a tiny room in a rundown building, the walls thin and the air thick with the stench of mildew. The rent was higher than she had expected, and soon, the small amount of money she had saved up from selling her belongings would run out. She found work at a factory, standing for hours, her fingers stiff from the cold metal she handled. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, and her hands were raw from the repetitive tasks. Rena's world became a blur of factory work, loneliness, and exhaustion. The city that had promised so much felt empty, and the Statue of Liberty that had stood as a symbol of freedom now seemed a mockery. She would walk by it on her rare days off, seeing the tourists snapping pictures, smiling in front of it, unaware of the struggles of the people who had come seeking the freedom it promised. One evening, after another grueling day at the factory, Rena sat on a bench by the water, staring out at the statue. It glowed in the twilight, its light still brilliant, but now it seemed like a faraway dream, something that belonged to someone else. She thought of her family back home, of the life she had left behind, and wondered if it had been worth it. The promise of a better life felt fragile, like glass that might shatter with a single wrong move. The turning point, hope and resilience. The sun hung low over New York's skyline as Rena walked down the crowded streets, her steps slow and weary. The city felt like a constant hum, a rhythm she couldn't quite sync with. It was as if everyone else had already found their place, while she remained an outsider, struggling to fit in. Yet, there was something different in her now, a quiet resolve, born from the realization that she could no longer wait for freedom to come to her. She had to take it. The factory work, though grueling, had taught her a lesson she hadn't expected. Survival was about more than just existing. It was about fighting for something greater. Each day she returned to her small, dimly lit room. She reflected on her struggle, but also on the strength it had ignited within her. She had come to America for a chance at a new life, and she had no intention of letting her circumstances define her. It was on one of these reflective walks by the water, when the Statue of Liberty stood tall in the distance, that Rena met Hassan. He was a fellow immigrant from Egypt, working in a local restaurant that she had passed by every day. His eyes, much like hers, seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories, but there was a spark in them, a quiet fire that drew Rena in. They struck up a conversation, and soon, she found herself returning to the restaurant every day after work, not just for food, but for the warmth of shared experiences. Hassan had come to America years ago, hoping to escape a life of poverty. He understood Rena's struggles, having lived them himself. He spoke of his early days in the city, how he had been rejected, overlooked, and underestimated, but how he had found strength in perseverance, in small victories. "Freedom doesn't come all at once," he told her one evening as they sat together, watching the orange hues of sunset fade into the night. "It's built piece by piece, day by day. We have to fight for it. Every step counts." His words resonated with Rena. In the months that followed, she grew stronger, more determined. She found a better job at a clothing factory, one that offered slightly higher wages. She started attending night classes to improve her English. The small victories began to accumulate, and with each one, she felt the light of the Statue of Liberty shine brighter, not as a distant beacon, but as a symbol of her own growing strength. Rena's confidence began to spread. She helped others in her community, immigrants like her who were lost in the sea of faces. She would translate for them, guide them through the streets, and teach them small things that made life easier. She became part of a network of support, a community that was slowly but surely carving out its place in the city. And then, one evening, as she stood at the water's edge again, watching the Statue of Liberty glitter in the distance, Rena realized something important. The statue no longer felt like a distant dream. It had transformed into a reflection of herself, someone who had fought, who had grown, and who had found her place. She understood now that freedom wasn't just about escaping a past. It was about creating a future. And she had begun to build hers, one step at a time. But even in her newfound strength, Rena knew that the journey wasn't over. The city still had much to offer, and much to take. She had learned that resilience was the key to survival. And with